And hello to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I saw in the chat we're coming in from many different destinations. So hello to all of you folks, whether you're from Kuwait, Argentina, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, the US, the whole gamut really. But I'm really excited to kick off day one of Buncee Creative Beginnings. So it's a really awesome day. I'm super excited for today's conversation. But before we get started, first of all, my name is Gimenez, and here at Buncee, I really have this opportunity and the absolute pleasure and privilege to be able to work with our entire global community, where we're able to actually share different strategies, ideas, and just best practices that we could start to take back to help improve learning for our kids literally across the globe. And before we get started with the entire discussion, I'm really excited to be joined today by our CEO, Marie Arturi. Hey, Marie.
Hey, Ida, and hello, everybody. It is a true honor to be here. So welcome to the beginning of Creative Beginnings. And thank you for joining us. And what I mean by us really is not only us, Buncee, but certainly the broader community. And I was thinking about this and I was saying, I know we talk about the 4 C's and sometimes the 5 C's, but today I want to talk about 3 C's. Creativity, community, and the one I'm adding is caring. And so many of you may know that the origin of Buncee was my need to create a digital artifact to share my appreciation for this remarkable scientific community that I worked with. And that community actually supported children. And so it is indeed my honor that I find today that we have Buncee and this remarkable community, and we are all also supporting children. So and then the caring piece is the obvious one. You are all remarkable. The challenges that have been tossed your way this year, how you've risen to the challenge, how it is truly, it's like anything in life, sometimes there are problems, but often good will come from it. We've seen not only teacher to teacher, but it is a true global sharing now in order to support our communities and our students. So what you've done with us in the Buncee Ambassador community, supporting each other. And when you're supporting each other, you're not only personally supporting each other, you're certainly supporting the students. When you share ideas for Ideas Lab, it's not only for Buncee, it's certainly for the extended community and the students who receive those amazing ideas and lessons. And then how you support each other on Twitter is something that is a true honor for me to share with anybody that will listen to me about how really amazing you are, how you educate each other, how you share lessons. It has been a true, true honor to be on this journey with all of you. And I am absolutely excited to see what we're all going to share over the next few days. So again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being a part of this amazing Buncee journey. Back to you, Ida.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, just to echo your sentiments, I have to say that it's been an incredible honor for us to just be able to work with the community. And I mean, I think it speaks a little bit more to the discussion that's about to follow, where we start to realize in this sort of new world of education that we find ourselves in, that what we need to think about is how do we build this support around the students. And with that, I'm really excited to sort of kick off this conversation with our upcoming panel. But before I do, I actually wanted to take a quick moment to share my screen and just share a little bit of the context behind Buncee, as well as the sort of future that we're looking to head into with this new school year coming up. And so with that, let me take a moment here. And Marie, I'm going to need you to confirm if you see my screen in just a moment.
We're going to do that.
So Marie, do you see my screen?
I do see your screen.
Well, perfect.
So here we go. We begin Creative Beginnings. So thank you, everybody.
Yes. So just to give a little context before we kick off this entire conversation, what I wanted to do with this is just really give a little bit of a background as to who we are here at Buncee and how this conversation and really just the entire events that are about to follow through this week have really come into play. And so when we think about, our global community, especially as everybody is chiming into the chat over here, what you'll really come to notice is that obviously we all have, just different resource needs and challenges that we're facing across the world, whether from the US, India, the Philippines, Malaysia, Africa, and other parts of the UK or just Europe at large, right? So there are different resource challenges that we might need to be able to face. But at the same time, no matter what classroom that you look at, there's always one common challenge that we face, which is the fact that as you dial into a more specific classroom, it's the challenge that we have as educators to be able to support a diverse range of students. And so in every single classroom around the world, what we'll notice is that we're going to have a group of students, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 30. And our challenge as educators is to be able to reach each of those different diverse learners, despite what their learning styles and preferences are in the class. And so some of these students come to our classroom with just diverse backgrounds, right? Some of them might have language differences, others have different reading abilities, communication skills, the way that they approach different problems are going to be different. But then us as historically, the way that we've gone through education is that knowing the fact that our students do come from diverse backgrounds, what we've done as a community has been about implementing almost similar strategies to be able to support these diverse group of learners. And that might span from the sake of giving different handouts. We also give books, we give different assessments. And then at the same time, we almost had this assumption that by giving all of these different materials, our students are still able to grasp them in the same ways that other students in their class might be able to. And the truth is that it's obviously not always the case. And we've come to realize that over time and time again. And so the reason we've done all of these is obviously, as we think about it in a very true sense, is that, these books, these handouts, all of these different materials that we've been providing to our class, it's scalable, it's measurable, and at the same time, although it's traditional, it's been a way for us to be able to sort of scale and understand what that impact education might be for our kids. But then at the same time, with that sort of scalability in mind, part of our challenge is that we've almost taken it as a cookie cutter approach, where we now started to build this unbalanced classroom where some of our materials and the ways that we deliver information to our kids actually leave some kids potentially behind, because it leaves us with the assumption that every student can learn in the same capacity. And us as educators, we definitely know that that's not always the case. And so where Buncee really comes into mind here is that, us as a creative tool, our hope is really to help renew that sort of focus on the individual student. And so when you look again, at the broad class of students that you might have, our hope with creativity is to give you a tool that allows you to be able to help engage each of the different students in your class and giving them that creative opportunity to be able to represent their understanding, express themselves, and engage themselves in ways that really work best for who they are at the individual level, but at the same time, with this creative approach, it's really meant to be scalable too. But then, this is our history all through now, right, here at Buncee, but in a true sense too, we've come to the year 2020. And obviously we're all fully aware of the whole challenge with COVID. And so while that was our entire vision for 2020, the truth is that I think we all can agree that 2020 had just different things in mind for all of us. And so I actually pulled this quick statistic here from UNESCO, a recent publication from them, about the global impact that COVID-19 had on education literally across the world. And so this is an actual interactive map that I just took a quick screenshot of, where it walks through all of the school closures across the world, starting from February until where we are currently. And so I took the snapshot of February 23. And so when you look at this map, what you'll notice is that on February 23, what we were able to do is start to close different schools. And it started with 2 countries at first, which was China and Mongolia. And so on the bottom of the map, you'll see the different color scales. The light purple means that it's a localized school closure approach for the nation. The dark purple means that it's a countrywide closure, and then what's in blue means that the school is left open. And so what you'll notice for the 2 highlighted countries, that they completely closed schools for their entire region, right? And so that was February 23. And now moving forward, literally just in a 1-month period, on April 2nd, what we notice is that it actually took an incredible scale. And so what you'll notice now is that the map really started to affect each and every single classroom, literally across the globe. And so in February 23, the statistic was actually that 16% of all of the different students enrolled in a classroom were actually affected by the closure. But by the time April 2nd, rolled in, we literally closed 194 countries of schools around the world. And that really meant that we affected literally over 91% of our students that were enrolled in a school classroom. And so with that, all of us started to face this sort of new, world that we find ourselves in, where, we had to start thinking about what this new world of learning could actually be, especially given that we've just affected literally 1.5 billion of our students. And so what I actually had quickly done is I took a quick look on Google to see, just the different sentiments that are around the world about, what happened with this entire shift with remote learning. And so this article from the New York Times actually highlights just different testimonials made by students as well as teachers over the entire course of, COVID-19 school closures. And so obviously, because, everything was so unprecedented, I pulled one of the first quotes, which is a little bit more of a sentiment about the teacher side, about how we had to start navigating this new world. And so one of the teachers actually wrote, "Here I am at 66, within a full year of retirement, having to learn how to use Google Classroom with 35 first graders at various places in their learning." And so that was the first main challenge that I highlighted in the beginning, right? But now when you think about, COVID-19, she continues to say, "I feel as though I'm attempting to drive on a road that I am simultaneously paving while also following a map." And so it's a really intense statement, but I think it really echoes the sort of sentiments that we as educators started to feel, now having to navigate this entire new territory of education, literally whatever country you find yourself in. And so the real challenge, though, is that while I'm only speaking to the teacher side of it, now when we think about what happened really with our kids, it really took it to another dimension. And we started to realize that this challenge, when we went to a remote learning environment, wasn't just about, how do we mirror that physical classroom to a remote classroom? And then how do we, mirror those different practices and do that as teachers? What we realized is that now with our students, that there were more problems that we needed to address. And it's the fact that our students in the remote learning world are actually becoming even more independent as their learners. And as a consequence of all of this, they start to come out with, just different stresses on their own. And so some of the sentiments that I have highlighted here are by, a 16 and 13-year-old. The first one says, "I'm not only stressed about school, but I'm often anxious that I will not be able to join and maintain access to online classes or assignments." The second one actually said, "It's really boring to read the lesson info by yourself and then apply it to your assignments. And I feel like this is the hardest part." And so it's really challenging, right? So us as teachers, we have our own stresses, but at the same time, us as students, we also are coming across just different stresses about what this remote learning environment can look like, especially moving forward. But then what we've come to see is that in the coming months, and the coming weeks rather, as remote learning really continued to happen, we realized that the challenge wasn't just about that physical classroom and how do you remimic it in the class and bring that, instruction delivery to your students, but it went beyond that. It went to the fact that when we started thinking about the classroom itself, what we started to realize is that we started lacking that human connection between us as teachers as well as our students. And the fact that we as educators might not always be there to be able to support them, and also what that really meant for their success moving forward. And so some of the other sentiments that were actually shared in this entire New York Times articles was that so much of what we do in the classrooms are driven by student responses and reactions. "I'd give anything to watch their faces light up, their hands in the air, their smiles, their fist pumps, and when they share a new learning or a big idea with me." And another teacher said, "I miss getting to celebrate with them, cry with them, and laugh with them. These are memories that my students will never get back, and this is what hurts the most." And so what we started to realize, as the whole entire period of remote learning happened, is that we started to transition to this sort of mindset that we didn't have this entire connection. And we started to miss, the people that really come to support our kids and all of the different, sort of togetherness that we really feel. And as a consequence, when we think about remote learning, it's really this sort of new opportunity for us to rethink the way that we are teaching our students. And it comes to build on this concept of us needing to come together, knowing that our students now are more than ever really built as individual learners. And the question for us as adults or those that are educating them is, how do we now come together to support those students that, we don't get to see every day, especially when they have like their aha moments, or when they're struggling with a class, or when they are starting to feel nervous, anxious? How do we come together as a school community to actually be able to support each and every one of them? And so with all of these different concepts in mind, we at Buncee really started to rethink as a team, what does education really look like for the future? And we've always had this sort of statement, right, that it's easy to create with Buncee, and our hope is that it's easy to share. But then considering all of the different sentiments that our community have really now been able to experience as a consequence of remote learning, our hope was to take this to the next level and actually think of it more so as easy to create and easy to engage. And what I mean by that is, we needed to start thinking about what are the different ways that we can better come together to support our community to not only make learning engaging for our students in the way that we have, but at the same time, how do we actually take that to the next level and also support the community that really aims to enable each and every one of our kids, no matter what that distance is. And so that sort of became our new calling kind of cry, if you will. And as a consequence of that, we really started to develop a range of new features for the community in a very short period of time. And so to support our educators, what we did was, at first we launched thousands of other templates and ideas that you'll be able to access. So as a teacher, when you use Buncee, our hope was to be able to help make much more time efficient for you, engaging, but at the same time, kind of reduce some of your stress, where you're able to go into the tool, access a template, or see a new idea that you can actually bring back to your remote learning practice, and you don't have to start from scratch. So that was one objective. Another objective that we had was to make that sort of dialogue between you as a teacher as well as your students a lot more seamless. So we expanded our functionalities to be able to allow our students to be able to add comments and replies, and really just foster that discussion that would take place normally in a physical environment, but now in a remote capacity, and also obviously do it in a very safe way. The third next thing that we wanted to do was make it a lot easier for you to live connect with your kids. And what I mean by that is that we recently partnered with Microsoft Teams to actually give you the ability to launch video calls right within Buncee, enabling you to not have to worry from going app to app, so that you can actually do your content creation in Buncee, and whether that's a lesson, your project, whatever your students and teachers want to create, but also be able to share that very easily. So you'll be able to have that meeting set up immediately with your classroom. And then last but not least, our most recent addition was the gamification component in Buncee. So as we start thinking about our kids being in a remote environment, how do we ensure that they still maintain that engagement and they're having a lot of fun, learning? And so we've added gamification capabilities in Buncee, where now as a kid or a teacher, actually, you'll be able to unlock just different rewards in order for you to be engaged, especially as you work independently. And so those are some of the new features that we launched in addition. But what I've been really pleased to see is that, some of our community members have been able to take benefit from it. And so just to quickly share, Iman Shaheen, who is an amazing ambassador of ours that's based out in Palestine, she also echoed the fact that, she's been able to save time with Buncee, and at the same time, she's also been able to not have to worry about opening up different applications to connect with her students. And since that she's able to launch video calls right within Buncee, it made it a lot easier for her to actually connect with the kids. But then going forward, some of the other things that we've been, really pleased to see is just the creativity that our teachers have now been able to have. So one of our educators, Go Ming, who's actually based out in Malaysia, actually shared a virtual escape room that he used Buncee for to help engage his kids. And so this has definitely been amazing for me to see. And I'll actually just take a quick moment here to show these examples. But this is actually made by Go, and this is his virtual escape the room. So he put a nice little visual that really can help to capture his students. He puts different markers on his map, where as they click on each of them, they'll be able to participate in the escape the room. They have to enter their information in and then release a code. So it's been a lot of fun for their kids. And then we've also been able to have different educators like Jim who's actually an educator based out in New York, where he's been able to leverage the tool to really try to engage his students, in particular for physical activity here, but just give them different visuals that make learning still interactive and fun in a remote capacity. And here are his different examples where he just puts this awesome visual together to get the kids engaged. And so these are just some amazing work and creative examples that I want to share from our teachers, but there's one in particular that I'm really excited to share about. And it's really to speak to the sort of engagement that we hope to be able to support for your students, especially in a remote environment. And so this Buncee that I'm actually taking a moment to share was just shared with us yesterday by one of our educators that's actually based out in New Jersey. And so Dene is an elementary educator based out in New Jersey, and one of her students was a special needs student. And so Dene's student, had a lot of different challenges, especially with writing and just really being able to adapt to some of the different learning concepts. And so his mom actually had reached out to Dene and asked, can you help him to be able to, learn, how to make a story and so. And so Dene actually took a moment to share how to use Buncee with this kid over a Zoom call. And what she realized is that this kid got so engaged using Buncee that she actually single-handedly, within 5 minutes, learned how to use Buncee, but at the same time, be able to actually put an entire digital story together. And even though he had different writing challenges. And so what you'll notice as I go through this quick Buncee here is that he loved dragons. And so he made an entire story about the dragon. He put the different visuals together to really piece together an entire story. And what's amazing about it is that this student actually learned this within 5 minutes, but two, he had this creative opportunity to really be able to just express his learning, his understanding, and at the same time, his critical thinking by all of the visuals, as you could tell from the Buncee, to really get engaged and really be inspired to learn more. And so that's one of the stories that I was really excited to be able to see, especially happening in a remote learning setting. And so with that, this is Dene herself on my screen, but it's really been such a pleasure to be able to see that some of the updates that we've been able to make have been supporting both our teachers as well as our students. But honestly, the truth of the matter is that there's really just so much more that we can do. And so just to kind of give context about 2020 and our future here at Buncee and what we envision as our direction is, we want to be able to make sure that we have this commitment to help you as a classroom educator or even as an administrator to make learning much more engaging and fun for your kids, no matter what that distance is. But at the same time, as part to supplement it, we're going to adapt the platform in a way that will also help you to improve that school community that will help enable that kid's success. And so with that, that's really the spirit of the entire next 3 days. And so our hope with Creative Beginnings is really to have our educators share different ideas, strategies, and best practices that will help you rethink the way that you are bringing education back to your classroom, and how we can actually come together as an entire school community to learn how do we engage our students no matter what that distance is. And so with that, I'm really excited to kick off today's conversation with Rachelle and our panelists here, where we're going to talk a little bit more and dive more into the power of school community, as well as how do we use or leverage that community to be able to engage our students, whatever that distance is. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to share that moving beyond this conference itself or this 3-day learning event that we have, we're also working with our community to be able to just support and everyone where we can. And so if beyond just today, you'll be able to tune into some of our other global upcoming sessions where they'll be held in actually different languages, where we could come together to collaborate to support other educators that are also looking to improve their practice. And some of them will be held in Spanish, others in Hindi, others in Arabic as well. And so with that, I'm really excited to be able to kick this conversation off with our educators. But before we officially get started, I just wanted to share that to kick off this event, because we're also talking about creative beginnings, is we're going to start it off with a win. So as you tune in and learn from any of the different sessions over the next 3 days, our hope is that, let us know that you're here and share, what you are learning and then at the same time, share it with other educators in your network. And so as part of our giveaway to help you jumpstart your learning, the first one of which is you'll be able to participate in our giveaway to get an entire subscription for your school for up to 5 educators. So in order to participate, what you'll need to do is actually let us know you're here. Take a photo of you at today's session. Feel free to share it on Twitter or on Facebook, but be sure to tag Buncee, hashtag Buncee Live, so that we could follow your journey. But at the same time, tag 3 different friends that you want to be able to share the ideas that you're coming out with from this event with. And then at the same time, on that same note, with a similar giveaway activity, you'll also be able to win a Buncee t-shirt, just like the one that I have on today. Yeah, so feel free to tune into our giveaway. It'll be a great conversation here after. But yeah, so let me stop sharing my screen for a moment, but I'm really excited to kick off this conversation with each and every one of you, and welcome Rachelle, our moderator, to the screen here, and our other guest panelists. Hey there, Rachelle.
Hey, Ida, good to see you. Good to see everybody joining in today too.
Yes. So today I'm joined with Rachelle Dene Poth, who is our high school and STEAM educator and Spanish educator based out in Pennsylvania. And like I mentioned earlier, our hope for this entire event is to help you understand just different strategies and ideas where you could take back to your practice to learn how to engage your students from a distance, but do so as well as an entire school community. And today we're joined by several different thought leaders and honestly just inspiring educators, including Dr. Bill Bass, Dr. Roland, Rios, Shannon Miller, and also Dr. Ilene Winokur. So as they come onto our screen over here, I'm really excited to introduce them. So Dr. Bill Bass is the ISTE board president. So it's really amazing to be able to hear your thought leadership in this entire space. Dr. Ilene Winokur is actually an educator who's also taught across the K-12 space as well as in higher ed. And she's currently based in Kuwait and has been teaching there for several years. And Shannon Miller, dear friend Shannon Miller. Shannon is an incredible educator with so many different inspiring ideas that she's been implementing across the entire US and really just internationally. And she is a district teacher librarian also based out in Van Meter. And Dr. Roland Rios, of course, Dr. Roland Rios is a director of technology based out in Texas, but at the same time, he's also the former TCA president. And so with that, I'm really excited as all of these different individuals will bring such a dynamic and just thought-provoking discussion based on the fact that we're looking to understand how to improve student engagement from a distance. And so with that, let me leave you to the conversation.
All right, thank you, Ida. And I am definitely excited to be here. Just listening to you and Marie, as you kicked off this event, it's hard to believe that it's already here because we've been talking about it for so long now. And here we are starting today. But just listening to the different stories that you shared in your presentation, talking about the students and the teachers and the impact that everything has had on them. And I'm looking forward to our panel discussion here today with everybody that is joining in, because we are going to focus on the power of community and how using that, leveraging that can help us to bring in new ideas. Working with student engagement, I know that is another big area that we've been looking at as educators, and how can we engage our students in learning, and then of course empowering our students both in and outside of the classroom. And so through our panel discussion today, we'll be addressing some specific questions, but I hope that for those of you that are joining in, you will also share your experiences, share your questions for the panel, and we check in with those throughout the discussion today. So to kick it off, the first question I would like to ask for our panel is, why is it important to build a sense of community in our classrooms and our schools? And to start us off, I'm going to go to Ilene to get us started.
Thanks so much, Rachelle. I'm so excited to be here with this esteemed panel, and thank you so much for moderating. Community means belonging. Something that I'm really passionate about. And if students and teachers don't feel like they belong, they're less likely to be engaged. Community is part of the welcoming culture we create in our classrooms and schools, and it provides safe spaces for everyone to feel comfortable taking risks, which means that if I am answering a question, I'm not worried about answering it wrong. I'm going to take that risk and try to answer it anyway. It means that if I fail at what I'm doing, it's okay, because I know that I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to be supported on that journey. And it's, also part of the learning process. And two, community helps us build our voices. So as students, many times they're sitting in the classroom and the focus is on the teacher rather than on the student. So creating a safe space and a culture of community in the classroom allows the students to be able to use their voice and feel comfortable expressing their feelings, telling their stories. It's something we need to work at and build up every day, creating that culture of community, and it needs to start right from day one. And for all students, especially for students who might not feel comfortable when they come in that door that first day, they might not feel that they belong in that classroom for whatever the reason. They may be a language learner or may have other situations that are going on that make them feel uncomfortable. And so community creates a space for everybody to excel, including the teacher. And it means that we respect diversity, we respect everyone has the chance to learn, we respect and we practice equity in the classroom, because everybody's voice feels safe to share. So community is really important because it's the whole idea of belonging. And if we don't feel we belong, really we can't learn.
Thank you. You have so many great points there, and things that just even as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking back to when the first couple of weeks that my school was closed and trying to make those connections with students and getting them to feel comfortable. But even just looking at going back into our classroom, whatever that space is going to be, something that I became more mindful of is the circumstances and really getting to know the students, what they were experiencing, because initially I was trying to focus on how can I teach everything from my classroom in this physical space. And I wasn't so focused on, like I normally would be in that physical space with them, where I could ask questions and check in with them, have those visuals, like where I could see if they were having a bad day or if they were struggling with something or felt uncomfortable. But that is something that I definitely wanted to work on. And so you had some really good reminders for everybody who's listening in as we're planning for whatever this upcoming year is going to bring, starting with the relationships, the solid foundation, because even though we can't necessarily plan everything, that's something that we can be very mindful about starting with. So thank you for that. And next, I will go to Dr. Rios.
Thank you, Rachelle. Let me start by saying I have these really cool headphones that I was going to use today, very modern, very sleek. They wouldn't work, and the only thing I could find was this sample kindergarten set of headphones. So thus the odd-looking, tiny little earbuds on my head.
Nope, they're looking good.
Yeah, thanks. She hit it right on the head. Community is extremely important. When I think community, the word that always comes to my mind, and you said it, Rachelle, is relationships. I think to build a strong community, you have to build good relationships and strong relationships among staff, among your administrators, and especially with your students. I hate to sound blasé, but there's that old expression: students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And until you start to develop those personal connections with students, the learning really can't take deep levels, can't go to deep levels. It's funny when the pandemic hit and everyone went to this online environment and we're teaching on Zoom. That was fine, and I'm not knocking businesses or anything. My wife is a computer programmer, so she could get on Zoom and they really didn't miss anything. I think we as educators, it was really tough for us because we missed that relationship. We missed that sense of community, of physically being with our students, because we can build so much rapport with them that way. So tools like Buncee and others are great ways for us to continue to build those kinds of communities. The other thing I'll emphasize with communities, it's especially important for teachers, especially right now. We cannot set ourselves on our little islands and try to survive. I think we as educators in general don't do a good enough job reaching out. I've seen a great increase in that lately, but I have yet to find an educator that if I didn't reach out for help, they weren't willing to help each other. That's just by our nature. We're giving people, and I urge everyone to always continue to expand your communities amongst your fellow teachers and educators.
Yeah, and that is something that you said too resonated with me, was just isolation, because for many years I kept myself isolated in my classroom, and part of it was I was having challenges and I was afraid to ask for help. But especially now, as we're finding are going to be challenges and struggles, and we're not going to all have the answers, it's really important for us to reach out, but also important for us to do that so that we can best support our students. So thank you for sharing your perspective. And then I'll head to Shannon.
I have to unmute myself here. And Roland, I do like your headphones. I wondered about that, but they do look really nice. Well, I think just thinking about community, like, of course, everything that we already talked about, like when we think about our kids and being a librarian, you know, just the space that we build for our kids, not only how we build it in our library, but throughout the school, and just making it a place where our kids want to be in, that they feel like they're heard. I think one of the biggest things too now, not just through remote learning, but also using technology with kids and tools like Buncee, is that sense of community that we can create with others, not just within our community. You know, and I am from a little town in Iowa where we have about 900 kids in one building, preschool to 12th grade, and we're all under one roof, but we learn with people all over the world every single week. And that sense of community and belonging has opened so many doors for our kids. And I think also just has opened our hearts to different voices. And that to me is one thing that Buncee and other things have really brought to our kids. And so when we think about, you know, being at home, that's one thing that, and we're going back to school on the 17th at Big Meter. But I think about all these kids around the world, and we need to really remember that there's lots of ways that we can embrace not just our community, but continue to do that for our kids and reach those global communities too, the voices that they have.
Yeah, and again, great points too. Just thinking about, I had a conversation with somebody thinking about if this would have happened 15, 20 years ago, imagine the capabilities we didn't have for communication, and people who are in rural school districts, like how would they connect to know what was happening in the rest of the world, and all of that, and connecting our students. So important to have something in place. And it can be overwhelming to think, where do I begin? And so we will definitely be sharing some ideas here with everybody from the panel discussion and then throughout the week here with Creative Beginnings. So let's move on to the next question, and I will turn this one over to Bill. The question is, regardless of, since many of us don't know how our school year is going to start, whether we're in classroom, remotely, or hybrid, what are some ways that we can build community in the digital space?
Thanks, Rachelle. I think that, you know, as I think about the unknown and the unknown that we are about to embark upon, one of the biggest things that I think when it comes to building that online community is that we have to be intentional about it. In so many cases, I see teachers spending the first week, the first 2 weeks building a community in the classroom. And then when we move into online spaces or digital spaces, we don't necessarily take that intentionality and transfer that over into that digital world. And so just being intentional can bring up so many opportunities for kids and opportunities to build that community. I think one of the biggest things we can do and continue to do, just like we do in our face-to-face classes, is offer our kids choice and understand that each one of them is an individual learner that is going to come together. And in that digital space, it may be technically harder to get to know them in our experience, except that one of the things that digital tools allow us to do is allows us to see them differently. It allows us to see them in terms of like really analyze, look at what their writing process is, if they are writing something for us, or what's really important to them because of what they've created. And in some cases, when you're trying to manage, you know, a class of 30 kids, it's really hard to do that and get to know each one of them as individuals and then get to know them as a class. when you are face to face. So digital tools can really help us see kids differently. And I think that's one of the keys to building that online community. So I think that tools like Buncee, I love this whole series because it really is about creating. And that's really what Buncee, I think, has offered kind of the world. And when I think about the way that my librarians use it and my teachers use it, is that it really has opened up the world. And I love this idea of being able to see kids differently through their work. And so, especially as we're talking about these online communities, and especially with the unknown, if we can be a little more intentional about the opportunities that we provide our kids. So whether that is, that introductory writing assignment or introductory creation, when kids are coming to us and they're talking about their summer or how they're responding to the fact that we have been quarantined and in a pandemic for how many months now? Like those are significant things, and those are significant events in their lives. And I think tapping into those through the use of digital tools can really go a long way to build an overall sense of community for our kids.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Just as you're talking, I'm thinking about some students in my classroom who, in the normal classroom space, they really didn't say too much. And I really didn't know too much about them. But at the beginning of the year, one of the first things I have them do, aside from some icebreakers, which aren't always the biggest hit with everybody, is to create an About Me Buncee. And I have to do it too, because if I'm asking them to do it, then it's important that I do it as well. And I've been able to get to know them so quickly through what they create with Buncee, because they're comfortable recording a video. They don't want to talk in class, but because they can record that in their home, wherever they're comfortable, make the video and share it with their classmates and get to know each other. So you're absolutely right. It's like finding the right tools that we can use to give students this space to share who they are, for us to get to know who they are, and for them to get to know and connect with us as well. So thank you for sharing your perspective with us. And I will head back over to Dr. Winokur to ask for, what do you think as far as how we start the school year? What are some ways that we can build community in the digital space?
Yeah, and this is a real concern that I see expressed on social media by teachers, and it's been a cause for a lot of anxiety, is this whole idea of not being able to create that community in the same way, just as Bill was saying just now. And so I think that what we really need to look at is, again, as Bill said, being intentional about it, looking for those tools like Buncee that you were talking about, Rachelle, that enable us as teachers to be able to bring that community together. And so one of the presentations that I've done recently was for Buncee Malaysia. And I presented the different ways that we can use Buncee to create that community and to make sure that students and teachers feel that connection, because we feel, based on the fact that we're not in the same physical space as students, that we're disconnected. And so using that intentionality, but at the same time, looking for those tools. And so during that, as you mentioned, Rachelle, I showed them the different All About Me templates. There's so many different templates. And then, of course, an Ideas Lab, so many different ways that teachers have used those templates. For students who are second language learners, newcomers who are coming to the country, there are templates and ways for them to be creative about showing where they live and where they came from. And so, again, this creates this connection, even though we're not in the same physical space. It's also really great because our parents, who have been so worried about moving to an online or digital space and the students not having that same experience, they're able to get involved also, because the students are doing that work in the house and they're able to share the stories with their parents. Perhaps their parents are able to talk to them about it, maybe even go in a little bit more in depth about those stories than they normally would have if they were doing it as a homework assignment or if they were doing it in class. And so all of those ways. And the great thing also about ISTE, I have to give a shout out to ISTE, because ISTE was sort of my beginning to be able to understand the greater world, living in Kuwait and not being really in a space to share with other educators, although there are educators here who share, but it's not that easy. And so ISTE opened up the world to me in 2016 when I was #not at ISTE. And from there, I found so many tools and so many people, like all the people who are on this panel, who share and want to enable other educators to be able to use those tools. So yeah, so it's digital space is more difficult, but if we're intentional about it, we can do it.
Yeah, and talking about ISTE, I feel the exact same way. And it's interesting because how many of us may not have ever met in person? We're connecting on social media, we're connecting in these different learning events. And then you go to something like ISTE, which is a massive space, and you're bringing in educators from, in most cases, over 70 countries, 16,000 plus people every year. And you meet face to face for that first time, and you already feel like you know that person because you've been able to connect in those virtual spaces. And so setting that example for our students and creating opportunities for them to learn how to leverage the technology and to post responsibly and all of the lessons that goes with it, so important. But also for us too, to go back to not keeping ourselves isolated in our own classroom and our own existence. So really good points to make as well. So thank you for that. And then Shannon, what ideas can you share with us?
Well, I think about, and I agree with all of those things. Like, it's something that I think when we think about like our PLN, our personal learning network, and just, you know, that community that we have, like through meeting people, you know, at ISTE or other conferences or online. And I think sometimes like I have a sophomore, well, he was a freshman last year in our own house, my son Hagen. And as he was learning online, I felt sad for him because I was sad that he wasn't with his classmates. But I also, in one sense, like saw him in building these relationships in a different way. And our little ones and our older ones and our teachers. And I think that through this, like, we'll be better in the long run because we're building this great sense of community and going through this, you know, terrible thing just together. And some of those skills that we can give our kids, if it's not just like building that sense of community, but feeling like empowered to continue to have that voice, giving them tools like Buncee, like Flipgrid, you know, to share the voice that they have, to give them things where they feel confident and they feel this sense of being creative and innovative, I think, again, will make us, you know, better in the long run. And it's the bottom line about relationships. And as long as we're thinking about the relationships that we have with kids, if it's in our buildings or online or in a blended environment, and I think those relationships that we have with kids, but also with their families, it's, you know, never been more important to really foster those. And so I'm looking forward to the year with our kids, but I too am thinking of ways like even how to know, you know, how do I get to know those new ones that we have? And it's going to be something that we have to think about every single day, but sometimes we're going to have to put that first and put the other things, you know, second. So.
Right. Absolutely agree. Thank you. Okay. So shifting a little bit from community now to talk about student engagement. Another very important, I was completely wrong about what student engagement was a couple of years ago. And so lots of things I've learned along the way, thankfully, because I've had PLN to connect with and kind of point me in the right direction. But in what ways have you seen technology increase student engagement? And for this one, I will start with you, Dr. Rios.
Thank you, Rachelle. We've been deeply involved in increasing student engagement in our district for many years. We've studied Phil Schlechte's work, and he does a lot of work on working on the work and how to get students engaged. And I want to focus on two things that Schlechte talks about and how technology helps. One, and Bill alluded to this earlier, is choice. I think the technological tools at our disposal of those of our students gives them a lot of choice and a lot of voice in the matter. And I love when teachers tell students, I need you to do this project and demonstrate your mastery of this content, but how you do that is up to you. And so whether they do a Buncee or a WeVideo or they create a Google site, it gives them a choice in how they're going to demonstrate that, and it allows them to use their voice in that as well. So I think choice is the number one for me in technology, because there are so many great tools out there. The second is technology can allow students to have an authentic audience. I think when students are producing work that's going to be seen by more than just their teacher, they really put an extra effort into it. And so because we have so many tools where students can publish things to the web, they can upload videos to YouTube, and they get this audience beyond the four walls of the school. We see their engagement level just rise dramatically. We were blessed to be involved in a project last year here in our school, where all San Antonio schools got invited to this. It was called Bear Fest. Bear is the name of our county. So Bear Fest hooked up high school students with nonprofits in San Antonio, and we basically created a media campaign for them. So we did print, digital photography, we did a digital ad design, we did an original song, and we did a video that these nonprofits actually use in their businesses. And for students to be able to work on that and know that it was going to be used by a company, used by a nonprofit, they really put their heart and soul into it. Happy to say we won about 4 awards at the Bear Fest this year. But it was that fact that they knew they had an authentic, real audience out there that was going to view their work, and that really engaged them and inspired them to do their best.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it ties in, with motivation, because they're working toward that purpose, and it does make a big difference. For me, like I said, for years, I was just looking at what students looked like in class. They looked like they were paying attention. Were they having fun playing the game or whatever it was, until doing some research and actually building relationships with students to find out what their interests were. Definitely helped me to kind of figure it out along the way. So thank you for sharing that, and I'll turn it over to Bill.
Yeah, so I think that Rachelle, that's a really interesting way to think about it, right? That for so long, engagement has meant this one thing, and then as we learn more, we change our view around that. And one of the things that I think technology helps us do specifically is, or what it causes us to do, is think of engagement beyond statistics, and think of engagement beyond logins. We have kids that can log into an LMS, and we can know that they logged in, they were on for this amount of time, but that doesn't mean they were engaged in anything. That just means that they were physically present. And it's the same as in the classroom in that aspect. But one of the things that I think technology does to build on what Roland was saying is it really allows us to connect. It allows us to connect with each other, and allows us to connect with our content in different ways. And so whether that, we can think of content broadly. We can think about it in terms of literature. We can think about it in terms of experiments. Whatever that context is fine. But what technology can do is connect us to that, connects us to each other. And so I think that the collaborative tools that come with technology really do increase that student engagement in so many ways, much to Roland's point, because we're not just making it for ourselves anymore, or we're not just making it for a single other individual, our teacher, because they told us to, but because we do have that authentic audience. And so I do think that the audience is part of that, but the reason that the audience is important is because of the community we build. And that's where, when we go back to our previous 2 questions, the community that we build is the basis for how that's going to look in terms of our engagement. And so, whether that is that we give timely feedback to, as we build that community, we give timely feedback to our students, or allow for peer feedback along the way, that technology gives us the opportunity to pull those things together, as opposed to having them kind of be separate things that we measure separately, so we can pull these things together. And I really like the idea of using technology to think about student engagement differently, as opposed to simply a series of statistics or logins or something like that that is going to give us this data set that may or may not mean anything to us in the long run. And so I really think that there's great opportunity there, but it goes back to that community. It goes back to the intentionality that we create as we teach teachers how to build a community in their schools, but also how teachers foster that community in their classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, just so many things about that is, it all comes back to relationships, right? Forming those relationships, having that space, having students feel comfortable in the classroom, working with their peers, and then comfortable enough to take some risks too, because I know in my own classroom, when we started to do project-based learning, where my students had tons of choices, that was difficult for them because they were used to being told, you have to create this, and then we're moving on to something else. But once they were given that choice, they stopped focusing on what the grade was. They were just really interested in learning and what they were going to do next. And the fact that they were sharing it with other people made a huge difference to them. So definitely important reminders for us to keep focused on as we're thinking about the activities that we're planning, especially at the beginning of the year, to get our students connected. And then what are some choices we can give them in the learning and how to share what they're doing. And I'll turn it over to you, Shannon, to finish out with this question. Oh, I think you're muted.
All the things that, we've already talked about. And when we think about, I think that our kids, like not all kids love technology. Like not all kids, we see them engaged in technology. And I think one of the things that I always try to remember is giving them a lot of choice. And it's, giving them choice on what they want to create, giving them choice on how they create it. Maybe they want to, mash up a few things together, and then giving them choice too on how they're engaged and even presenting it and sharing it. I think that that's one thing that we always need to keep, in the back of our heads, and just think that, again, that it's not that one size fits all. It's something that we really need to think about each one of our students. And through remote learning, I think that we've had so many ways that we can really personalize that student engagement for all of our kids. And that's one thing that I've always felt that technology has the opportunity to do. But I think especially right now that we can really increase student engagement, just thinking of some of those things too when it comes to each and every one of our kids.
Yeah, definitely agree. And there are so many choices out there that we can pick from. And it's just finding something that with the students who, and even adults, I mean, not everybody loves technology. And I remember a couple of years ago, my students kept saying, can't we just draw? And I said, you can, because Buncee has a drawing feature. And so I want them to build these skills, but I also want them to be comfortable with what they're doing. And so they did have the choice. They were able to still draw, but we kind of worked it out. And it was a good way for us to have conversations and say, okay, well, I understand you don't want to use this, but I really want you to try this out and see what happens. And it ended up being like a favorite for the student too, which I said, see, had you never tried it, you wouldn't know. And I said, I would have valued your opinion if you would have said, well, I still prefer paper, because I love paper projects, but it's just nice to have these options available within this digital space. And speaking of digital space, so we're looking at community and connections and relationships and student engagement, and so many options and choices out there. But before we think about planning all of these different possibilities for our students, it's really important to first focus on equity and inclusion and making sure that we have all of the things that our students need so that they can be successful in learning. And so for our next question, I'd like to go back to you, Ilene, to talk about how can we as educators ensure equity and inclusion in that digital online space for our students?
Yeah, I think this is a really important and key question. And I know that based on what's been going on around the world and the inequities that we've seen as a result in terms of access to digital devices, access to the internet, and so forth. It's, again, that we need to be intentional about who our students are, who our teachers are, where our schools are located, and to make sure that we plan intentionally for arranging and accommodating everybody in our classrooms. And I think we need to start looking for, and I know that there are groups that are looking for solutions, but in terms of the equity and inclusion piece, the idea of creating community and having the digital tools, and even digital tools that can be used offline, like Buncee can, and some of the others can, is really, really important. I know that it was a group in Lebanon that has 3 schools for Syrian refugee students. And they found, and also I've seen this in other communities that don't have the access to devices, that they at least had a smartphone for the most part. And so they began using WhatsApp to deliver their lessons. And so I think it's the idea of creativity, which I love, the creative beginnings, because we need to be creative with how we're using our devices, and also how we're using our communication with everyone. And so creating those communities, allowing students, parents to be able to reach out to us, to reach out to administrators, to reach out to teachers, and through their students, to give the students a voice, to be able to say we either have access or don't have access. I've seen schools around the world be quite creative with offering internet and so forth. I think we really need to look at global solutions to the lack of access. But in terms of students even within who have that access to internet and to digital devices, we also have students who are second language learners, students who come from different backgrounds, students who perhaps have special needs and so forth. And so creating those spaces and creating that community, and I'll come back to that whole idea of belonging, it creates that trusting environment where if I'm having a problem accessing or doing, I'm able to voice that concern, either as a parent or a student, and be able to get access as I need it. And so I'll go back again to what Bill said, which is the intentionality of making sure that we are deliberate in how we plan things. And I know it's so much work for teachers and schools to be able to accommodate, but we're a creative group, so we seem to be able to manage whatever comes at us. And like Marie said at the very beginning, because we're so caring. So we need to be intentional, we need to be deliberate, and that way we can include everybody and make sure that everything that we offer is equitable.
Yeah, and you're right about, there are so many things that we need to consider, but pulling it back in, it's when we're connected and we have these different spaces, or we have some resources that we know that educators are sharing their experiences, they're sharing what they're finding in terms of resources. And I know that, just as an example, talking about ISTE again, with the Digital Equity PLN, they've had a lot of great webinars and conversations and discussion in the community that I've joined in over the past couple of months. And I started a Wakelet collection with so many different things to go back to when I have some extra time, but at least it's a starting point, and then that's something that can be shared. So speaking of ISTE, I'm going to go back to Bill for this one and see, what are your thoughts about what we can do here to make sure that we're looking toward equity and inclusion?
Thank you, Rachelle. I find it interesting that at some point you think you're going to have some extra time, because I don't really know what that's like. So I'm looking forward to learning about that from you. But as I think about equity and inclusion, so one of the things that let me talk about it in 2 different ways. First of all, from the lens of ISTE, we are committed to equity, and we're committed to inclusion for all kids, and making sure that we really do provide those opportunities for all kids. When thinking broadly, though, and thinking about my own district, a lot of times when we think about equity and we think about inclusion, we think about it in 2 basic ways. We think about it in terms of equity in terms of access to the internet, and access to devices. Like really, that's kind of the lens with which we think about what equity means. And so, but I would argue that we really need to think about this more broadly, and we need to think about it in terms of the equity of experience for our kids. Because right now, when I think about, especially in distance learning, when I think about the way that our kids are going back to school and the way that we had our, emergency learning or distance learning, whatever we called it in the spring, our closures, the bottom line is that we had kids that had very different experiences, and they were very much based on who the teacher was that they had. Right. And now that's always kind of been the case when it comes to the classroom. Right. We always have, your teacher dictates a lot of the experience you have as a student. But when it comes to technology at this point in 2020, technology is not really an option anymore. And it took actually, if we really want to think about it, it took a pandemic for us to realize that in K-12 education. And so when we're talking about, the experience that kids have, we have a huge equity gap when it comes to the experiences that our kids have, especially when it comes to technology. And even now, when we go back to school, we're going to have a wide variety of expectations based on what our kids are, based on who our teachers are, based on what our district is, based on what resources our kids have. And so, yes, we need to figure out Wi-Fi. We need to figure out how to get devices into kids' hand. But as we figure those things out, those things actually don't matter if we don't figure out how to actually help kids use them. And Ilene, you referenced that in your as you were speaking, because it's so important for us to intentionally design experiences that take advantage of the technology that we're putting in front of kids. If we are just trying to recreate the classroom in an asynchronous or a synchronous environment, we're really doing our students a disservice, because they're really not going to be able to be prepared for whatever's next. The world is ever changing. 8 months ago, we didn't think we'd be in this position. We certainly didn't think we were going to be teaching fully virtual in a lot of our schools. Yet here we are. And so now that we, let no crisis be unlearned from, right? Let's go and let's figure out how we respond to this, because the reaction that we have now is different than the response that we will have in the future. And so equity is far more than just devices and Wi-Fi. It has a lot to do with how we intentionally design experiences for kids. And that is one of the things that we can actually make a dent in as educators. Wi-Fi and devices, those have to do with funding. Those have to do with the infrastructure and all that. Classroom teachers may not have the influence on that. Leaders do, and they need to absolutely be cognizant of that. But really what it comes down to, the thing that every single educator on the planet can influence right now, today, is the experience that kids have when they come back to school here in a few weeks.
I don't even know where to start. You dropped so many good things in that, and I was checking out the chat there. People just agreeing with the points that you were making. So true. I am, for one, a person who did not think we would still be in the same situation, very hopeful that things would go back. I also was somebody who was trying to do everything from the physical classroom space in the asynchronous space. And then I realized once I started talking with the students, so a lot of learning just shows that, we always are learning, and by connecting and working with our students and building those relationships makes a huge difference. But yeah, I'm going to have to rewatch this and go back and listen to all your points. There were some really good takeaways that you said there too. And I want to make sure that I go back to that. And anybody that has questions too, be sure that you drop them in for anybody here on the panel. And so now that we've had these different pieces, we're looking at relationships and community and connections and focus on the accessibility and equity, imagining that we have all of the things in place and we're looking back at our experiences. And if I go to you, Dr. Rios, first, can you share with us some examples of how being connected has made an impact on you, on your students, on your colleagues, anybody that you work with?
Yeah, well, Rachelle, thanks so much. I'm going to show you how being connected has made a huge impact in our district. And our district is a very unique one. So some of you will be able to relate, some others not. We are a public school district in the middle of San Antonio, but we are entirely on a military installation. So while we're a public school district, every student that attends our school is a military dependent. We reside right on Fort Sam Houston. We are the home of Army medicine, home of military medicine. So we've got Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and we serve those who serve. We serve their children. So being connected for our students and our staff is extremely important. At any given time, about a third of our kids will have a parent deployed overseas. We also are home to a lot of our wounded warriors who are returning from overseas. And so those families get uprooted from wherever they are. Mom or dad are in the hospital, amputees, burn victims, and they're facing stressors as well. I give you all that because keeping these kids connected to their family, keeping them connected to mom or dad who might be overseas is vitally important. I'm a dad, I'm a grandpa. I can't imagine leaving my children for 14 months at a time. But technology has been the catalyst in helping us keep those parents connected to their children's education. So while other schools may be closing down or locking down their Google domains so that students can't share stuff outside, and I fully understand the rationale for that, we don't here at Fort Sam Houston because we want mom or dad to be able to help edit a paper if they're in Afghanistan or Kuwait or Germany. We want them looking at our students' Buncees as they share them virtually with their mom or dad, or send them love letters using Buncee. We want them to share Wii videos with mom or dad that are deployed. And it's made such a vast difference in keeping those parents, those active military members, connected and part of their children's education. So when we ended up going virtual, it was a fairly seamless transition for us. And that connection, that communication that we had already established because we are such a military connected district, it was in place, and it helped make that transition so much smoother.
Yeah, lots of great examples that you gave there just about the capabilities that we have for connecting, and even just things that I've seen within Buncee for different initiatives, the Hugs for Heroes, and even over the holidays, the holiday hugs, and the ability of us to connect with people all around the world. And even beyond that, have the capabilities through immersive reader where languages can be translated so you can share it with anybody. But very, very powerful reminders of why it's so important to be connected, and of course the impact that it has on each one of us. Thank you for sharing that. And then Shannon, how about, can you share with us how it has impacted you, the power of being connected?
Well, I mean, again, like I said earlier, our school, we're a little, school in the middle of Iowa. And so just by being connected, like first it started with me, going places like ISTE, probably when, I first met Bill and several of the people on this call, and thinking about all the ways that I brought back, not only those connections, but even connections to, companies like Buncee, Microsoft. Like we think of all those doors that's open for our kids, and that opportunity that they've had to use these great digital tools. And even, we've collaborated with like Buncee before on projects, and the kids have Skyped with Marie and Ida, and it's just been so great to see that. But then also just those connections with other kids like around the world, and those relationships they have, if it's connecting in a Flipgrid or a mystery Skype or even pen pals, and we send them, in the mail, artwork and letters and things. But we did a project, I don't know, it's probably been 5 years ago, a Winter Around the World project, and we had over 250 schools around the world participate and make this like great Buncee. But for the kids to see like what their winter was like here in Iowa compared to what it was like in Oman or India or, even another place in the United States, I think those are memories that our kids will always take with them, and they're not going to forget those things. And I know just having my own kids at my school, like I hear those stories about how that's really opened their eyes and has made them even more, accepting and more open-minded to different things that we might encounter too as our kids, get out into the real world. And so those are opportunities that we're always looking for. And I think that we need to continue to remember that, even though we're at home learning remotely, it might be more challenging, but we need to look for those opportunities to keep them connected, not just to the people in their school, but to other people as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just thinking about in my own experience, just doing project-based learning with my students in Spanish 3 and 4, probably started about 4 years ago, and making connections. And we have used Buncee to share with students in Argentina and Spain. And just over the past 2 or 3 years with the same group of students, being able to connect and share and create an About Me Buncee, where some of my students were like, why are the students in Argentina wearing heavy coats? Because it's summer. And then you have the discussion, well, it's not summer there. And just forming those relationships in that space. And I know for me, being able to connect with those teachers to learn more about what life is like for students there, what school is like. But even most recently, when our schools were closed, having that ability to connect with those students in Spain, because my students doing their project-based learning projects were able to ask questions directly to those students that they had connected with through using Buncee. And so just, I mean, the learning that happened made a huge difference and an impact on them, but also on me as well. So highly beneficial. And for anybody now thinking about, yeah, it's great, we have these connections, you have everything set up, we're connecting our students, our classrooms, ourselves, but how did you start? Like, what if somebody doesn't know where to begin? What suggestions would you make, or what advice could you give? And for that one, I will go to you, Ilene, first. What can you share with anybody looking to start making some global connections today? Wait, muted.
Global collaboration. See, I'm sorry about that. I knew I'd do that at least one time. Global collaboration obviously is really important. And for me being in Kuwait, it's been extremely important, as I mentioned, about joining ISTE and finding out about ISTE through Twitter in 2016, and finding out about so many other different things through my global connections with other educators around the globe. I've been lucky enough to been able to be part of several mystery Skypes explaining to different classes about Kuwait and what it's like here. And they've been so fascinated because it's in such a different part of the world than most everybody is. I am also, my PLN is my lifeline, really. My PLN on social media, especially now in terms of this type of emergency. It's extremely important for us to all stay connected. We happen to all be experiencing a global pandemic that nobody ever imagined. And there's so much we can learn from each other in terms of what we do in the classroom. Each school, each country is at a different place, experiencing different levels of the pandemic, different things that are going on in their countries, and coming up with different solutions. In fact, yesterday, Bronwyn Joyce, who is in Australia, posted on Twitter that she had found out 2 hours before that the state of Victoria, where she lives, outside of Melbourne, was shutting down immediately because of a rise in cases. And she wasn't sure what tool to use. And she reached out, and there were still answers coming in today of all kinds of things. She said that they weren't using Google. And so, there were so many different suggestions. By the time she walked into school this morning, she already had a plan in mind based on the feedback she'd gotten from her global group of her global PLN. And she'd been able to make it work. And she was going to be training the rest of the teachers in her school who aren't as tech savvy as she is to be able to use, she decided to go with Seesaw because it was something that they'd have access to. And so that's proof of how important it is for us to have our global connections. I'm also happen to be past president of the ISTE Global Collaboration Network, which I've been on since I joined ISTE after I was not at ISTE. And I've had such an amazing journey with my team and with everybody, all the members of the PLN and those as part of ISTE, because we've been able to have webinars from educators all over the world. Our newsletter that goes out every month has all kinds of activities and different events and conferences that teachers can take advantage of. So that global collaboration piece, for me, as I said, has been my lifeline. And I always encourage educators to reach out and to really expand their own PLN. And I know that all of you who are still in the classroom are talking about the kind of collaboration and the global collaborations that connections that students have. So I'll leave that for all of you for your experiences. But for me as an educator, it's really been a lifeline. So.
Yeah, and I will say that I have enjoyed getting the Global PLN, those newsletters, because they are full of amazing resources. And so I wonder if it's awkward to say past president, because I'm finding myself trying to say that now too, as it's the past president for Teacher Education Network. I'm not used to it yet, but that really is a great community and a space for connecting, and as is the Buncee community. So here, even just in the chat, seeing people making connections and sharing ideas. On Twitter, lots of things happening, of course, on the Facebook community. So definitely there are a lot of spaces for that. So thank you for sharing. And Shannon, any advice that you can offer as well for making global connections?
Yeah, I think there are so many places, like just to, we're part of this community on Twitter, Facebook, or even participating in webinars like this. And so you can make connections with others just by listening or reaching out and never being afraid, to ask if people want to collaborate. But there's also a lot of places that we can make connections. Skype in the Classroom is free for everyone, and they have a great place where not only you can find a community of people to make connections, but they also have just like live on-demand type events, and they've been doing a great job every week just putting new things out there and also archiving them. We also, things coming up, like for those of you who celebrate Dot Day, that is a great way to get connected. And if it's, joining a Skype or a Zoom, but we've used Buncee to even create like Buncee boards of Dot Day Buncees or collaborative books. And then one thing that we're doing, and I shared it, I think they're going to share it with all of you in the chat too, is when, we're rethinking like how we're even going to share as librarians or as teachers, like with our kids, if it's like virtual story times or pop-in story times. And because we have to be careful because we can't record them, we can have them live though. And it doesn't have to even just be within our school community. It can be with other people too around the world. And, something as easy as sharing a book or sharing where you're at in a mystery Skype, or we made like mystery state Buncees from a mystery Skype last year, like anything that you can do to make those connections. But there's lots of places if you're totally new to this to start. So hopefully some of those resources will help too. But bottom line is, don't be afraid, like reach out, get connected, get on Twitter or on the Facebook page, and just, start connecting, because that makes a huge difference for your kids.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the resources that you mentioned and any other resources that have been shared or additional ones will be shared with everybody. So if you're looking for them, don't worry, we will be sharing those after. And then finally, Bill, any other thoughts to add about advice to get started?
Yeah, the only thing that I would tell you is that just recognize that you only have so much time too, right? You can't do everything and you can't be everything everywhere. Like there are so many things, and we've mentioned a lot of them here, but you have to find the one that is going to resonate with you. And that doesn't mean that just because it resonates with me or somebody on this panel doesn't mean that it has to resonate with you. Find your community, because that's where you're going to find the energy. You can't do it all. And so be selective, because if you are putting your attention into one place that's not fulfilling for you, then that means you're not putting it someplace else that will be fulfilling for you. So that's the only advice I would give is, figure out how to curate that yourself so you're not so overwhelmed, because legitimately you can, every time you turn around, you can find something else. So just that, I guess that's my only thing that I would add.
Thank you. And I wonder, just out of all of us here, how many times you yourself have said the word overwhelmed in the past. I see laughs and head nods. And even running out of fingers, I mean, you just can't, it's just so much. And even just everybody here in the chat that's joining in, or if you're watching later on the recording. And that is a word that I know I have said so much ever since school's closed. And I can't recall who I was listening to a few weeks ago, but they said that overwhelmed just means you just don't know where to start. And so finding focus, okay, what's one thing that I can do? And even though we all want to do all the things, we can't, because there's never enough time, and our summer's off right now, right? No, somebody said, where do you have enough time? We're always working and planning. But the thing is, we don't have to do it alone. There is somebody out there, and maybe there's somebody just like us who's afraid to ask or doesn't know where to start. Just put a tweet out, post something on Facebook, tag the Buncee community, tag Buncee. I mean, somebody will answer you and will connect with you, whatever your question is, whatever your need is. That's the power of community, and especially in this Buncee community. So thank you to everybody here on the panel for sharing today. It has been a fantastic conversation and a wonderful kickoff to this event, Creative Beginnings, that we'll have a session, 2 sessions tonight coming up. And so thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. I've learned so much, and I do have to go back and listen again, because so much of what you all said, lots of great takeaways. If anybody wants to connect with us, please do on Twitter. You'll find the information on the Buncee event website. And I will turn it back over to Ida to take us toward the end here and finish up. So thanks everybody for joining in.
No, honestly, thank you so much to everyone. Your ideas were so obviously insightful, but just really thought-provoking. So really appreciative. And honestly, if you look through the comments here, I think our community really echoes the same exact thoughts and feedback. So really, thank you so much. And then just to be cognizant of everyone's time too, I know that it's evening because we have a lot of people tuning in from just different countries. So I just wanted to share some of our next steps here. In order for you to get your certificate for today's session, I hope you guys all had learned a lot just as I did, but we're sharing the form, so you should see it on the screen, but it'll also be pasted in the chat. So be sure to just fill it in with your information, including your name, and all of your follow-up information. And that way we'll be able to share with you your certificate for attending. And then last but not least, thanks so much for everyone sharing all of the different ideas that you came across and posting it onto Twitter and Facebook. We'll be announcing the giveaway winners at 8 p.m. Eastern time today, which for some of you might be actually tomorrow on August 4th. But that said, honestly, thank you so much to everyone. This has been such a thoughtful, really just meaningful conversation, and I hope everyone had learned a lot. I know that community is such a big focus for us moving forward, and the ideas that you have shared have really been so inspiring for us all. And so with that, thank you so much to everyone, and we'll see you next time. All right, take care.
Bye.